Our Old Testament reading is from the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 18, verses 15 to 20. Moses continued, "The Lord your God will raise up for you a prophet like me from among your fellow Israelites. You must listen to him, for this is what you yourselves requested of the Lord your God when you were assembled at Mount Sinai. You said, 'Don't let us hear the voice of the Lord our God anymore, or see this blazing fire, for we will die.' Then the Lord said to me, 'What they have said is right. I will raise up a prophet like you from among their fellow Israelites. I will put my words in his mouth, and he will tell the people everything I command him. I will personally deal with anyone who will not listen to the message the prophet proclaims on my behalf. But any prophet who falsely claims to speak in my name, or who speaks in the name of another god, must die.'" The New Testament reading is from the book of Mark, chapter 1, verses 21 to 28. Jesus and his companions went to the town of Capernaum. When the Sabbath day came, he went into the synagogue and began to teach. The people were amazed at his teaching, for he taught with real authority, quite unlike the teachers of religious law. Suddenly, a man in the synagogue who was possessed by an evil spirit cried out, "Why are you interfering with us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God." But Jesus reprimanded him. "Be quiet. Come out of the man," he ordered. At that, the evil spirit screamed, threw the man into a convulsion, and then came out of him. Amazement gripped the audience, and they began to discuss what had happened. "What sort of new teaching is this?" they asked excitedly. "It has such authority. Even evil spirits obey his orders." The news about Jesus spread quickly throughout the entire region of Galilee. May God add his blessing on the reading of his word.
So our passage this morning is from Mark's Gospel, and it's a continuation of the story that we had last week where Jesus calls the first four disciples that are fishermen, and it says that they go into a synagogue in Capernaum, right? I don't know why that left me. It's in my notes here somewhere, but and Capernaum is on the Sea of Galilee, and it's believed to be where Peter and his brother Andrew and James and John are living, because in later in the Gospel, or in one of the other Gospels, shortly after this, it says that they go to Peter's house, and Jesus heals his mother-in-law. So Capernaum is essentially the area from which Jesus has recruited Peter and his brother and James and John, who are also brothers, and he's gone into the local synagogue and he started to do some teaching. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the way Mark tells some of his stories and some of the things that are very that help us to get a better handle on Mark's gospel. Excuse me. The first one I want to talk about is what's called the Markan sandwich. And yeah, Linda's chuckling. There is another fancier name, something along the lines of the Markan inclusion. No, it's not that. It's anyway. See, I had it and I've forgotten that now. Sandwich is easy to remember. I'm sure you'll remember that one. And what it refers to is a strategy that Mark uses when he's telling stories where he starts by introducing one story. So you'll see on the slide their intro, he'll introduce story A, and then suddenly he'll interrupt that story with a different story. Now, it isn't like there's, like it's a different place or time or anything, but it feels like, especially in some of the other stories, that he's inserted a separate story, and he does it in such a way that it becomes part of the bigger story. So we'll have the intro to story A, and then we have intro to story B, and then we have a conclusion to story B, and conclusion to story A. Our story this morning is not one of the prime examples of this, but I believe that it's an important note that we will talk about in a second. But I'll give you an example that a lot of people recognize if they're familiar with the Gospels. The story where Jesus, a man from, I believe it's somebody important in a synagogue or something, it says, comes to Jesus and asks him to come and heal his daughter, his sick daughter. And Jesus says, he agrees to do that. And it says, while they're on the road, a woman comes up into the crowd, comes out from the crowd and touches Jesus' robe because she's been sick with a disease. And she feels that if she just can touch the hem of his garment, she'll be healed. And it happens, she's healed. Jesus turns around and says, who touched me? Everybody goes, what in the world do you mean? There's a crowd all over the place. And then he talks to the woman, and that concludes that inserted story along the way. Then they continue on. The guy's servants come and say, it's too late, the daughter's dead. And Jesus says, don't worry about it. They go to his house, and Jesus raises the little girl. I think her name is Tabitha or something like that. And there are other examples of this. In our story this morning, what happens is Jesus goes to the synagogue and he begins teaching. And the people respond with, what amazing teaching. This is so unlike everything we're used to. He speaks with such authority. Now that story could end right there, and that's why this would be a weak example of the Markan sandwich. But as we look at it, I think you'll see that it's reasonable to use that mechanic to analyze the story. Then, suddenly, the story talks about a man who is possessed and cries out. Now, if you've heard this story several times and stuff, that probably doesn't really stick out much. You think, oh, well, Jesus is there, the presence of the Holy Spirit is so powerful that it causes these spirits to react and stuff. But I don't think that this would be an everyday occurrence or in any way an expected occurrence for the people at the synagogue. It isn't like, they have demon-possessed people coming to synagogue all the time. It isn't like this is a place where they normally do exorcisms. It's not like, bring your possessed relatives to synagogue to get exorcised. Exors, to have their spirits driven out, evil spirits. Now that might happen later in Jesus' ministry when people start to realize that the kind of power he has, and they start coming to him for all kinds of healing, because we do see that in the Gospels, that once Jesus' healing ministry becomes more prominent, there are always people bringing people with demon possession or oppression or whatever. The spiritual battle continues. But I would say that in this setting and in the way that Mark is telling his story, this is kind of like an interruption. We have Jesus teaching, we have people's reactions to his teaching, and then suddenly we have the forces of darkness reacting not to Jesus' teaching, but to Jesus. The Spirit cries out and says, have you come to destroy us, Holy One of God? Now think about that for a moment. What's happening is that in this whole story, Mark is introducing us to the fact that there's something different and something special about Jesus' words, about his teaching, about his style. And a lot of teachers will tell us that one of the reasons for that might have been that Jesus speaks in his own authority. That is to say that he makes his own commentary on scriptures or on people's lives without appealing to another rabbi or another interpreter or to a certain tradition. He speaks with prime authority, so to speak, rather than relying on other sources. Whereas other teachers that the people would be used to would be more inclined to refer to not just the scriptures, but to other teachers, to other writings. At this point in history, they have tons of writing that helps them, like commentaries, that helps them interpret the scriptures. And usually people will appeal to those authorities rather than their own authority. So then the story, that was to explain that that's what the people are reacting to, the way in which Jesus preaches. But this possessed person reacts to Jesus himself. Remember, that's what the conversation between the demon and Jesus is fairly short, but what the demon says shows us a couple of things. He's reacting to Jesus himself. He refers to Jesus as the Holy One of God, and he refers to a fear that that Holy One is going to destroy them. That evil spirit understands that Christ has come to overturn the power of evil in the world, and understands that he has the authority to do that. And so Jesus does two things. He tells the spirit to be quiet, shut up, and come out of the man. This in itself is going to be rather extraordinary, not just to Jesus' audience, but to Mark's audience. Remember, when we read the Gospels, that there are a couple of audiences in play here. There is, when we see Jesus in public, there is, who is Jesus speaking to? Who's listening to him? How are they going to receive the things he sees? Then we step back and we say, well, Mark wrote this story for an audience that's somewhere within the first 100 years or so of Jesus' life. And who are they now? Where are they? What is the world they live in? What do they see and think when Mark writes these things? And then there's us. We're the third audience, right? What is it that we see? What is it we hear? What is the Spirit telling us in the story? But to Jesus' audience and to Mark's audience, they're going to notice that Jesus casts out the spirit without any procedures, without any special words, without any appeal to any other authority. He doesn't even appeal to his Father. He just says, be quiet and come out of that man. So in that included story about the demoniac, Jesus has acted entirely in his own authority, and he has shown that that authority comes with power. And he's cast out this demon who in the story is the only one that recognizes who Jesus really is and where his authority comes from. So then the story concludes, and I would suggest that if you wanted to try this out, read the first part of the story, skip the part with the demon-possessed man, and go to the ending of what we read this morning, and you'll see that the only thing that tells you that you're missing something is that one phrase about he can even cast out demons. So we go to the end of the story, and it repeats, what kind of authority is this? He doesn't speak like other teachers and religious leaders. He speaks with a different kind of authority. Authority so strong that he can cast out demons. But see, they're still asking a question, and that takes us to the other Markan thing that happens in Mark's Gospel. It's called the Markan mystery. And what the Markan mystery talks about is that up until about halfway through Mark's Gospel, Jesus will continually try to keep the fact that he is the Messiah, the chosen one of God. He continually tries to keep that on the back burner, as it were. So we have this demon-possessed man, and this happens more than once, that recognizes who Jesus is, that says something like, you are the Holy One of God, and Jesus tells it to be quiet. He wants to shut that up. And then there are other times when he does miracles and he tells people he says, don't tell anyone. He sends them home and says, don't tell anyone. And we believe that what's happening here is that, and this is a storytelling technique of Mark, is he knows that his audience, Mark knows that his audience knows who Jesus is, right? So there's no secret from his audience. Having it appear to be kept secret in the story builds a sort of a suspense, but it also makes people, it highlights the fact that the other people in the story don't understand who Jesus is. Okay, so step back for a minute. I want you to and I spelled quiet incorrectly. Look at that. I want to come back to expand on this a little bit. So what's happened is Jesus has come to the synagogue. He's started teaching. Mark doesn't bother telling us what he's teaching. He doesn't bother telling us anything about that, his message. Presumably, it's the exact same message that we heard at the beginning of last week's story, which is repent, for the kingdom of God is coming very close. And the people react to how he speaks. how well he speaks, the authority he uses in his speech. They react to what they see, which is normal. The demoniac, the man who's possessed, reacts to Jesus' presence. It's a spiritual presence, and it senses or understands or observes another spiritual presence, which is the presence of the power of God in and of Jesus himself. And at the end of the story, we return to the people who understand there is something at work, there is a power, there is an authority, but they question what it is and where it comes from. And you can see, if you're the audience and listening to the story, you can see that what Mark's doing is he's saying, see, you get it, they don't get it yet. That's the Markan mystery, right? That it had to be revealed at the proper time. And that this lack of, or this giving of revelation, highlights the difference between the understanding of Jesus' actions and an understanding of what those actions point to. So, where do we go with all of that? Well, I've talked before about how the society that Jesus lives in is a society of honor. And what that means is that people interact with each other based on a perceived honor scale, based on how they perceive each other's level of honor. Their social standing has to do with their honor. And there are two kinds of honor. There's ascribed honor and assigned honor. And ascribed honor is honor that you, I'm doing this properly. I think I've got them backwards. Ascribed honor is, yes, okay, sorry. Ascribed honor would be, in honor, if I'm born to a family with great honor, then I have the honor of my family is ascribed to me. If we knew in this story that Jesus is the Son of God, he carries the ascribed honor, which basically is what we see the demon doing. He recognizes the ascribed honor that Jesus has. But the people in the story are assigning honor. When they say things like, this is amazing speaking, what authority he speaks with, they're assigning honor. And what I've done is I've put those together, and I believe that in our story, what we're seeing is an overlap, honor and authority. And there is, in the society, there is a complete overlap, right? Because if you have honor, then by extension, that gives you a certain amount of authority, right? If someone in your village or whatever has great honor, people listen to them. And that means there's an authority that's involved in that. So in this story, there are two kinds of authority or honor that are in play. There's the ascribed honor authority that we see that the demon recognizes, and then there's the assigned honor authority, which the people are actually giving to Jesus as they recognize his gifts or the things that he does or the way in which he speaks. And I believe that part of what Mark is doing with his Markan mystery is that he's sort of holding at bay the ascribed honor